Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to TravMedia's latest professional development session. Great to have you with us this afternoon. Good to have you here. And the topic today is, what do travel editors want? And to get to the heart of that vexing issue for all travel industry PRs, we have three of the leading travel editors in the UK. And I'll introduce them quickly now so they can give you a wave. We have Ben Ross, Deputy Head of Travel at the Telegraph, fresh with new haircut. We've got Lyn Hughes, founder and editor of Wanderlust, and we have Sophie Lam, travel editor at I. So Sophie, Ben and Lyn, thank you so much for joining us. And the name of today's session, What Do Travel Editors Want? That was Lyn's suggestion. And it is, I'm sure, a perplexing question for some PRs. Is it Japanese pearls, Belgian chocolates and Swiss rolls? Or is it well-angled stories, an understanding of the readership, pitched on the right day in the right way to catch the editor's attention and get them thinking of the story on the final page? Well, we're about to find out from our experts. So this is just one of the TravMedia professional development sessions that we're running. We ran the last one 2 weeks ago. That was Crisis PR, which showed us that, you know, handling crisis PR is like playing escape rooms. I think pitching the right story to a travel editor is kind of like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, because you're going to get 15 questions on whether your story stands up, and you've got to be able to say yes to each of them. I think we will find that out from our experts today. So we're going to start off with 5 minutes of thoughts from each of our travel editors on what they look for, how people get things right, how people can get things wrong. And then we'll turn to you, our audience, for questions. So have a think even now about the questions that you would like to pose. It's on the bottom toolbar if you're on a laptop or PC, top toolbar if you're on a mobile phone. And if you could put your company name at the end of the question, that would be great, because Zoom just tells us your own name. Do start pitching some questions. We'll handle most of the questions once the panelists have done their opening bit, but we may pitch one or two beforehand. And obviously I want to give you a shout out. So please think about what you'd like us to ask. So I'm going to start with Ben, alphabetically. Ben Ross, Deputy Head of Travel at the Telegraph Media Group. He began his travel writing career in 2001, quickly became travel editor of the Independent newspaper by 2007, and the Independent on Sunday 2011. He joined the Telegraph in 2014 and takes responsibility for editorial content across both of the weekend's travel sections in the Telegraph. So Ben, you are inundated with ideas from PRs every day of the week, electronically and by phone and every other medium known. What do you look for?
Well, I think it's probably important that we divide what we look for in terms of stories a little bit into the pre-COVID time and the post-COVID time that we're currently existing in, or continual COVID time that we're currently existing in. I mean, the traditional thing that I would always say in this when asked 2 months ago or 3 months ago is a great story, you know, a timely peg, interesting angle, a new opening of a hotel, a new flight route, anything that I, as someone who works in a newspaper, can hang a story on. And it's a sort of game in a way. I mean, what I always sort of feel is that I have to present these stories beyond the presentation that a PR gives to me. So if an idea is good enough, I will be taking that story on to the weekly conference that we do in Lifestyle every week, where I have to present a little bit like I was at school, all the ideas that I'm hoping to run in the newspaper section that week, both sections that week, in front of the lifestyle editor, who's a woman called Jane Bruton, who is absolutely lovely. But she's also a little bit scary, and I would quite like to make sure that the stories I give her are brilliant, that they're interesting, and that when she asks me why a particular piece is in, I can answer sensibly and coherently exactly why that piece is running this week, why that writer's doing it, and why it's an interesting story for our readership. And in a way, any time I can do that, if it's a story that I've worked closely with a PR in, or something that I've generated myself, or something that a freelancer has pitched, the goal really is just to be able to almost deliver the stand first, the summary of the story neatly and concisely, to Jane or to another editor that I'm speaking to. And if a PR can help me deliver that stand-first concisely to my boss, it makes me look really, really good. And it makes the story fly. It makes me feel responsive about working with that PR again. So I think the notion of, I mean, all the stuff that you'd expect me to say at this point, make sure you're pitching to a specific outlet, make sure you know what you're going for. This is kindergarten stuff, and I don't want to patronize anyone by saying that too often. But if we can sort of boil it down to an essence, it's the reason to run the story, summarized concisely so that I then can project that internally, and then I feel confident about how to project that reason externally, which is to the readers. So, you know, and I think this is maybe a little bit specific to newspapers. I think newspapers operate on that sort of specific sugar rush of the news cycle. They want pegs, they want reasons to run stories. It may be that Lyn, when she speaks, is able to talk a little bit about the more considered, more in-depth, slower but more elegant pace of magazines. In national travel newspaper sections, we're sort of always running around like crazy things, looking for new and fresh ideas. And that doesn't mean that we're not also after, you know, elegantly written, you know, game-changing, Pulitzer Prize winning travel writing. But essentially, I refer back to the fact that fundamentally I have to prove exactly why a piece is running each week. Now, obviously with the arrival of COVID, everything has changed. And the traditional news stories that travel PRs might want to be putting in front of people are conceivably much harder to generate at this point. You know, if your client is a hotel and the hotel is shut, if your client is a destination and the destination is off limits, these inherently are not being presented with the daily or weekly news cycle that you might be generating or that you might be responding to, and it's therefore going to be harder, I think, to deliver that peg that I might be keen on. But I don't think as a result of COVID that everything has changed in that way. It's not impossible, I think, to deliver these things. A good example would be what Boris has been talking about over the last couple of days, which has only been tangentially to do with travel, of course. But the instant take home I got on Friday was obviously the really sort of, I mean, I think we all knew it was likely, but the real sort of firm feeling that it's going to be quite unlikely that people will be traveling a great deal abroad over summer. I don't think that came as huge news to people, but it really was sort of hammered home a little bit. And Matt Hancock has obviously been helping with that particular dynamic this morning. But you know, any sort of sense of depression about foreign holidays, I think, can be tempered immediately with the huge interest that there's going to be for UK holidays this summer, because the real thing that you took away from that was the possibility, all being well, that by the 4th of July, you know, this slightly arbitrary number that was being used, the huge appetite that will be there amongst British tourists to go on driving holidays, to take a holiday rental, to go anywhere in Britain that's got a sort of sense of space, you know, to go for water sport holidays, coastal, you know, all these things. That should have been, that's the green flag really at this point from a travel newspaper section to be going, right, very, very soon we need to be talking about all these things. Now, this week we'll probably be talking about them in a news environment because we're going to be reflecting on what's happened with Boris. But from a PR perspective, it's a brilliant time to go, right, how can I make the stories that I might be thinking about, the things that I want to place relevant to a travel editor who needs to be putting this together in the next week or two or three. You sort of use Boris as a lever here. Boris obviously been used for much worse than that in his time. But to start presenting ideas for activities that potentially we might think are viable in July. And I think, you know, sort of winding up a little bit, I think equally that will apply to the months ahead hugely as well. As time unfurls, in a way, we're going to have to be really, really nimble. We're going to have to react to the things that are in front of us. And that's whether you're a travel editor or a travel PR. And we're going to have to project, if you're thinking about from a newspaper perspective, maybe a week or two out, if we see that things are going to change and that might open up new avenues. That's what I want the PR story to be about. I want that to be engaged with that. And if it's for online, then you obviously want to be thinking about what's happening today, what's happening tomorrow, what people will be searching for from an evergreen point of view. I had a great example of a PR who got in touch with me recently, actually right at the beginning of lockdown, about an idea that I think it's been done in a couple of places now, but I think we were quite early to do it, which was the sense that you can't travel anywhere at the moment. You're limited to your garden. So what's the furthest you can do? Well, you can see to the end of the universe. You can look up at your stars. You can start learning how to do all that. And she very brilliantly had put me in touch with a speaker on one of her cruise ships who was a sort of a very worthy astronomer. And I used that. I turned that into Explore the Universe and all that sort of stuff. And I was able to get this story from this guy about all the things you can see in the night sky, which was essentially also an opportunity for that PR to highlight the cruise that particular astronomer was going on next year in 2021. It's a really nice way, and it turned into a cover for the Sunday section. So I think that sort of thing is a great way to go. But look, I really think the most important thing at the moment is to bear in mind the thing I've been experiencing more than anything else as a travel news editor is just how sort of ad hoc everything feels at the moment. You know, every week we're putting our fingers up in the air just to see which way the wind's blowing, to see what we feel is appropriate for our readers. But you know, if you want the real truth, that there is going to be cause for optimism coming forward in terms of the stories that you pitch and the stories that you want to place in newspapers, because there's going to be positive stories almost every week from 2 or 3 weeks' time, I think. Every time a new flight route begins, every time a new hotel reopens for the first time, every time a new country relaxes their quarantine rules rather than imposes them, you know, any one of those, I would have said, introduces the opportunity to pitch to a national newspaper. And then when we do sort of begin to come out of this properly, the potential feel-good factor for travel editors and for travel PRs is huge, because we'll have lots and lots of reasons to run stories all the time. So just finally, I mean, the old rules of getting in touch from my point of view with the travel PR are those simple facts. The fact that by and large, I'm going to want a really good reason to run a story in terms of the way you communicate with us and in terms of the way that you follow up. Look, if you think something's specifically very, very good for the Telegraph and you think that I should be following up, and for goodness sake, follow it up. I need as much help as I can get, particularly at these times, to make sure that the stories I've got are proving worthy for internally and externally. And frankly, you know, the virtuous circle of travel writing, someone reading a beautiful story, someone answering the fact box, someone going on the holiday, you know, that we want to kickstart that again. And the circle is only complete when PRs and travel writers and editors are talking to each other as much as possible.
Thanks, Ben. That's fascinating. So from pitching stand firsts in normal times to cover section stories in the time of coronavirus, there's some amazing insights there. Thank you very much indeed. So Lyn, from the travel magazine publisher and editor's perspective, could you give us both sides of the coin? What makes a great travel pitch in normal times, and what is interesting you in these surreal times in which we live?
I think for a magazine brand, the change in the last few weeks has been even more dramatic probably than it has been for a newspaper. And I've actually written down what Ben said about the elegant pace of a magazine, because it doesn't feel like that normally, but I do rather love that phrase. So I think I'm going to aspire to that. But obviously, at the core of the business is a print magazine, or print and digital magazine, which comes out 10 times a year. And normally that magazine is planned way in advance. You know, I'm under pressure at the end of each year to produce a feature list for the next year for my commercial team. And so while there'll be a few gaps in there and a few things that aren't actually commissioned, but, you know, we're looking to do, it will be kind of 90% really what we're running in the next year. So I'll know which destinations I want to cover, what themes I want to cover, you know. And so it's fairly predictable from that point of view, even if I'm not quite sure yet on the specific angle of something. And then, of course, as well as the magazine, we've also got the website, which is increasingly important. And even the website, though, it used to be relatively predictable in that we would know that, you know, in spring we'll be running these stories, you know, in that particular week we should do a Bluebell Woods story because that'll work, and another one we should do spring breaks. And So, you know, there was a nice kind of rhythm to everything, if you like. So, of course, what has happened in the last 2 or 3 months, how many weeks are we into now? Everything has turned completely upside down. And so the magazine that was due to come out, go on sale a couple of weeks ago, is actually coming out this week instead. We've changed the timing slightly, and we changed about 50% of the content in it. And then the website, we have almost completely changed the content that we're running on there as well to reflect the times. And doing all of this as well with a tiny core team, because we've furloughed more than half the team. And so it has been a dramatic change. And actually, it's where, in a way, some PRs have really come into their own, because it has opened up opportunities. You know, we've been desperate for new content, fresh content that we feel will work at this time. And so we have actually, ironically, been working with PRs probably more than ever before. And these aren't necessarily on the big stories, but it's on the small things. So, for instance, obviously, you know, the type of content we've been looking for has evolved week by week. And we've been quite successful, if I like to say so myself, at that. We had a record day on the website the other day, and our traffic is just going up and up on the website. We're running about, I think it's about, over 25% up year on year. And so what we've been doing is obviously pivoting and trying to be agile and seeing what's working and what isn't. And so one of the things that has been a focus, for instance, is armchair travel, understandably. And that is where, for instance, a lot of PRs have come to the rescue. So whether it's virtual tours, which of course were a big thing initially, but even now we're still doing those, doing various rounds-ups of those and starting to break them down more and keep those updated as well. We keep refreshing them. And then we've been moving on to a lot of fun content, such as quizzes. Quizzes are going down really well. And again, PRs have helped us with some of those, feeding into those. And they are just, you know, proving so well that we're breaking those down more and more. And positive stories, good news stories, things like we have a roundup of positive wildlife stories from around the world, and that does really well. And again, we keep refreshing it. We add to it or take away from it, and again, a lot of that has come via PRs. And so I think that, you know, like I say, it's where perhaps the case of Wanderlust, PRs have really come into their own. As far as, so most of that is for the website, some of it's been reflected into the magazine. I am in the really unusual situation where the next issue of the magazine that we're already starting on, which will be a July-August issue, we're going to do another combined issue. I don't know 50% of what's going to be in it, because, you know, I'm frantically watching the news all the time. I'm looking to see what people are looking at on the website. I'm waiting for announcements, waiting to see which country's open. So again, you know, I'll be looking to be able to act quickly for the big features. There's quite a few in the bank, if you like, where people have already been on trips that I can choose from, and I can slot things in and out. But again, very much, particularly for the front of mag and the back of the mag, I will probably be looking for things at fairly short notice. So although I hate to use that phrase, unprecedented times, it really is. It's exciting times, if I'm honest, as well. You know, it's been stressful, but it's also exciting, and you know, and it's brilliant to see my team rise to the challenge. As to what PRs perhaps might not all be doing, I think one of the things is, well, the main thing, key thing is that obviously the basic principles still apply, that at the end of the day, we have a certain audience, and it's PRs understanding who that audience is and the type of content that we will run or not run. and some still get that staggeringly wrong, and we'll send in something, something to do with golf clubs or something, and or whatever, and really not the sort of content we would run. So those basic principles still apply, but I think it's more important than ever that PRs understand the brand, understand who the readers are, and I think that is the most basic thing. And I'm always happy to respond if somebody does say, well, do you think this would actually suit your readers or not? Providing it is obviously pretty much on brand. So so stick to the basics, but also keep coming to us with the ideas that are reflecting the times. And I would say at the moment we are particularly looking for good news stories. People want to feel that they will be travelling again, and they want to feel good about those travels.
Very good to hear. And of course, I miserably failed to introduce you at the beginning of that. I think everyone knows who you are anyway, and the story of Wanderlust is legend in the industry, but I will say that you sketched it out on the back of an airline sick bag with your late husband many years back, and it's grown from there. And when life gets back to normal, we will be back to the Wanderlust Photo Awards, the World Guide Awards, your events and so forth. And I'll also add that you're a fellow of the Royal Geographic Society, chair of LATA, and involved in many tourism and sustainability related issues. There, how embarrassing was that? But thank you for the words of wisdom, Lyn. Right, with Sophie, I have the chance to get it right by actually introducing her properly first. Sophie, lovely to have you here.
Hello. Hi.
Sophie's travel editor at and I think there's a misconception still that is related or in some way to the Independent, entirely separately, owned by Johnston Press. So Sophie began as a travel journalist at the Independent, and went on to work across the Independent on Sunday, and London Evening Standard, launching the Independent Travel Awards. In between having children, she joined when it then became owned by Johnston Press, and you're going to tell me it's now been sold on from Johnston Press, and that's right. And who owns the now?
So so it is very confusing. DMGT, who owns the Daily Mail, bought the just before Christmas, and we were sort of formally taken over just a couple of weeks ago, actually. So in amongst all the madness, we're learning how to use new systems, and the poor guys in IT are trying to send out new laptops, and it's all good fun. I guess I hope I'm not being offensive just to go over that. It's that just sort of give an essence of who the Eye's reader is. The fact that we're not owned by the Independent anymore, and our readers are very different to the Independent's audience now. They are very much dispersed outside of London, slightly older, sort of 50s, 60s and 70s, culturally curious, quite active, and fairly engaged with travel. So our sort of pre-COVID travel offering was a section, a sort of 8-page section in Weekend, which is a sort of flagship travel section, and then some travel on a Monday and Wednesday within the paper, and then digital. And that's just me doing that. I don't have a team. And then we have kind of digital news journalists picking up news stories in the week as well. And yeah, I mean, I guess that has slightly, I know pivot has become a bit of a sort of catchphrase at the moment, but our pivot has been to kind of switch from the sort of time consuming process of print over to digital and respond to news stories, because, they're doing phenomenally well. Everyone's searching for when they can go on holiday at the moment. And then kind of have a sort of a reduced section at the weekend, and a little bit here and there in the week that kind of picks up on kind of news stories more than kind of features. And I guess, like Lyn was saying, it's been kind of distractions as well, quizzes, virtual travel, bit of armchair travel. We're doing a column with Lonely Planet at the moment from their writers while they're sort of still out there. and kind of Q&As as well. And then of course Simon Calder's column, which I guess still makes it really confusing with the Independent, but we still syndicate their copy, as well as from the Financial Times and the Economist, but not so much from travel. And I guess, yeah, for me, in terms of what I want from PRs, is just a really good understanding of our audience and how they like to travel and what they like. They're quite price conscious, so we don't tend to feature very high-end trips. I'd say their kind of average spend for travel over the course of a year is about £2,500, which is quite reasonably low. I mean, my kind of barometer is, can I afford to do that? And I think working in travel, you become so immune to the kind of 6, 8, 10 grand holidays that they all feel quite normal, but actually it's not certainly not my world, and it's not for our readers either. Yeah. We last year launched our Staycation Awards, which we are very keen to pick up again, perhaps not this year, maybe early next year. I guess staycation has really gone back to the true meaning of the word, with us really being at home, holidaying at home. But we're really keen to pick that back up again when it's sensible to do so, and celebrate, hopefully, what will be, you know, I hope, if not a good summer, a good autumn for the domestic tourism industry, and celebrate what we've been able to kind of get through. And yeah, I guess, what else can I say about our audience? So I don't really have a long-term plan. It's, as Ben was saying, it's kind of very much putting the finger up in the air and feeling what's going on. And I'm really not planning longer than a week ahead at the moment. The features that we're running are kind of hinged on news. So a PR got in touch with an opportunity to talk to one of her safari operators. And from that, we kind of launched into a story about the crisis in conservation. So it's that kind of thing that I'm looking for at the moment. That might well change next week, who knows. Talking to kind of high profile travellers about where they're looking forward to going to, but certainly not really thinking about commissioning any trips, even thinking, yeah, I know someone was asking about commissioning trips for autumn. I'm certainly not in that zone at the moment. Just feeling very cautious about how we pick up again, but obviously very keen to support the industry in getting back up on its feet again as well. And I think Lyn touched on this. I actually feel quite excited that this is a time for us. I mean, probably a once in a lifetime opportunity for us to kind of stop and think about what we've been doing previously, how we've been traveling, and how we can change models within tourism, within what I do in my job. You know, just throwing out all the plans and all the kind of, oh, it's Christmas market time again, oh, we must talk about Easter holidays. You know, we can kind of rip that up and start again to an extent. So I think that's quite an exciting opportunity, and a positive one, and making sure that what we're doing is kind of promoting travel that's fair for everybody, that gives a voice to perhaps hopefully smaller companies that didn't have a voice previously. I know there's always a tendency inevitably to talk about the companies that have huge sort of marketing budgets. I'd love to kind of celebrate the smaller outfits that might pull through or emerge from this. So yeah, I think there's a lot of positivity that will come out of this once we kind of get moving again. And yeah, I'm kind of keen to hear about your ideas, and perhaps, you know, it's an opportunity for PRs to be as radical as they want to as well, I guess. And even if you think it's, oh, I'm not sure how this might fit the eye, I'm really happy to hear about it and sort of think about ways that we could make things work in future as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Sophie. One question I wanted to ask you has already come up as a question from one of our guests. So you've been intrigued in the last 24 hours about whether domestic holidays, the quarantine area, will include France as well as the UK. And we've got Nadine Carl Edgar at Savoie Mont Blanc Tourism saying, you know, are you receptive, Sophie, Ben, Lyn, to ideas about French holidays late summer and autumn?
It's certainly on my radar. Again, I'm feeling quite cautious about how we, you know, the borders are still not open to kind of casual tourism yet. So I'm not going to be commissioning anyone to get out there, but it's kind of on my to-do list, I would say.
Yeah.
I think from my point of view, it's almost what I was referring to earlier about the right moment. I mean, it's not, it doesn't feel quite like the right moment, but it's certainly the sort of thing that we'll be leaping on as soon as there's actually a movement that you can join a story onto.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly hope that, as I say, I hope that things like quarantine arrangements, that the mood music becomes less about them being imposed and more about them being removed, so that we can start talking about that sort of holiday further afield. But yeah, well, as Sophie says, it's not something that necessarily I would jump on now. Equally, I think about specific clients, in a way, the way I would probably be addressing the sense that we can go on French holidays is to go quite general. I mean, I would be the stories that would kick off would be roundups and specific regional focuses, rather than perhaps on a specific country or having a colour read to illustrate that. I sort of want to make sure that France gets the full fandango when and if we are able to write about it.
Yes, the when and if, it's this continued uncertainty, isn't it? A predicament here for Debbie Walker from Drifters Canal Boat Holidays. They are reluctant to in any way promote their holidays at the moment until there's any sort of green light, or waterways equivalent of a green light. They're thinking, possibly there will be a return to canal boat holidays in July. What would your advice to them in terms of their PR be at the moment?
My feeling is that, I mean, it depends what you mean by the word promote, really. I mean, it is quite possible and reasonable that if I were to think that we could be looking at canal boat holidays in July or August, that I might commission a story on that basis, at which point Drifters could easily be involved in that. Or if take it or leave it, if you see what I mean, the way that would work. But I could see perfectly reasonably that in terms of promotion, as in working hard on a brand from a PR perspective, if your client isn't keen to do it, then I can understand why not. But equally, there is the risk, I guess, let's say it all starts opening up on the 4th of July, that you get drowned in all the other noise that's going on. Because if everything goes as well as it could go, and Boris Johnson has no ability to know whether that is the case or not, but if everything goes as well as it could go, we do have a position where things start opening up in July. It's going to be big. It's not going to be just canal boats. It's going to be hotels. It's going to be camping. Camping is going to be huge, I'm sure. And villa rentals and all those things. So just be aware that it's timing is everything. Again, we're sticking the finger up in the air, but we have to be really, really aware that if you leave things too late, you can get lost in the maelstrom of people being terribly excited that suddenly we're all going on holiday in Britain again.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's so important that PRs and the brands are still keeping in touch with the media now and keeping themselves in our minds. And it's good to just be touching base on things. I mean, for canal boat holidays, to me, surely they are going to do really well, because it's pretty obvious already people are going to be doing anything where they feel safe. And I think, therefore, that car hire is going to do well, and self-drive. I think there's already been talk that caravanning is going to do really well. Motorhomes are going to do well. Anything where people can be in their own little unit, if you like, and a canal boat, I think, would fit into that. And also it's relaxing and stress-free and healthy and all of that. And so I think there's some real stories there, and absolutely just keep kind of trying to keep in front of journalists for now, because there's going to be so much noise when things do open up. And so I think I heard somebody this morning use a phrase about you've got to keep the light on, and I think it's true, really. You just got to be just chipping away a bit and keeping things ticking over, so that when we're thinking of ideas of and it might just be for a roundup, exactly, rather than a big article, but we'll be thinking, oh, and what about canal boats? Oh, who can we contact about those? So you've got to keep in mind,
But you're looking for that announcement that people may travel beyond their own area to other parts of the UK, rather than just their own area for the purpose of exercise. Oh,
yes, and of course, and we all are, but at the same time, certainly what we're finding with Wanderlust, who are kind of, a lot of them are super travellers, is they're also dreaming of all the other things they can do. So yeah, UK stuff, for instance, is doing very well on the website, but at the same time, there's a lot of exotic stuff doing well as well. You know, even Safari Planner, you know, and things to do in Peru, and Costa Rican eco lodges are all kind of trending on our site at the moment. So I think there's a real mix of potentially, certainly with our audience, them looking at stuff for this year, it might be more about UK places as they open up. Looking at France, we're rubbish on France. We've got so little content on France. We are actually going to be specifically looking at building up our French content over the next few weeks. But then they're also dreaming about those bigger, further afield trips, even if they might not do them until next year. So yeah, so we're keeping our eye on that as well. Absolutely.
If we do find ourselves talking about to your point, Henry, the opening up of the UK again, I don't think, from my point of view, I wouldn't be suggesting that we wait until we're told. You know, if the mood music is that is going to happen, then I think it behooves us to act on that now. You know, so when we're talking about how we might get to things and the crucial importance of timing, then it doesn't mean that in the next 2 or 3 weeks before the 4th of July, we can't speculate that summer holidays may be back for UK travellers. I think it would be remiss to suddenly just wait for Saturday the 4th of July and go, oh gosh, he did say that, we can do it now. We want to be clear that, I mean, I think optimism is the key thing with travel. I mean, it's been a place sadly short of it recently, but I do think there is we can build up the concept that potentially in the summer we'll be able to travel, because at the moment that's the direction of travel. Sadly, if that doesn't come to pass, that's a real shame. But I still think people should be at least allowed to conceive of what they're thinking of doing this summer, and that would include, as Lyn says, you know, the joy of the canal boat, and it would include the joy of sitting in a campsite. You know, these things are really important. And the other thing about timing, again, as Lyn's saying, is travel is also about planning. It's also about getting ahead on things. And you know, if we use the example of COVID getting in the way of things, that's absolutely there. But at the moment, people, if they were thinking of booking a holiday in Australia, they'd be thinking about a year off. If they were thinking about a holiday in South Africa, they'd be thinking about the end of this year. There's lots of stuff that we can get in front of people that might well, with all things being equal, not be dramatically affected by COVID, simply because of the way people book holidays and the timings that they look at it. So we need to get over the idea that just because everything is bleak in terms of the ability to travel at the moment, it means it's going to be bleak in terms of the ability to travel at all times.
I'd just add as well that in sort of going back to domestic tourism, our audience is very much dispersed outside of London. They're really vocal about, a lot of them are very vocal about not wanting a sort of stampede of tourists to go and spoil their nice sort of COVID-free patch of the country. So I'm certainly being really cautious about how we talk about kind of unleashing tourism back into those parts of the country. And I think there was a sort of a message from Visit Wales on the chat here about how we can get the message out. I'm really keen to hear from kind of DMOs, tourist officers, about your plans in the kind of absence of any coherent answer from the government, just about what you're doing to plan for the 4th of July and before that, and how we can guide our audience sensibly and carefully and responsibly to your parts of the country and elsewhere, so that we can help to promote tourism and do it in a kind of proper and sensible way.
We've got Mike at Visit Wales saying, don't forget, at the moment, Wales is under slightly different regulations, so we don't want any suggestion of travelling into Wales at the moment. But you know, when we do get the green light, we will want people back. That is quite difficult when we have slightly different advice in different parts of the country at the moment.
I'm not sure, actually. I think it's a reasonably easy message to get across in terms of the way we talk to our readership. And it's just, I mean, we will quite often find ourselves talking specifically about England when we're running stories. And as with Sophie and Lyn, we're producing so much news content for travel at the moment that the narrative's there. I did a podcast for the Telegraph yesterday that you know, where I had to make it very clear that all the things I was talking about were specifically to do with England rather than any of the devolved nations. So I mean, of course, you know, I'm sure all of us will get things wrong occasionally in terms of the way we're dealing with it. But, you know, we, like everyone else, are following the news and trying to respond appropriately. So, yeah, you're right. We're not talking about belting across the border to enjoy the joys of Wales at the moment.
Extending that definition further, Charlotte Wright at Rooster PR says, would you consider the Republic of Ireland as part of the definition of a staycation destination? Would you include that in your editorial at that time?
Yes, I think the quarantine report, you're not quarantine coming in, but you would be going back or going in that direction. So I think there are sort of sticky issues still with that. But yes, certainly if the common travel area enables us to travel more freely, then yes, I would do.
But at the moment, it does seem that the Irish, as Sophie says, it sounds like the Irish government aren't necessarily going to reciprocate in the way that you might have hoped if you were someone wanting a holiday in the Emerald Isle.
Yeah. I've got Alan Godwin at Reef and Rainforest. He asks, is there any pressure that can be brought to bear on the FCO to rescind the blanket ban on all foreign travel, given that it's becoming apparent that some destinations are beginning to loosen their regulations internally, and a blanket ban doesn't allow for a measured approach to this? Now, there's a contentious question. Who would like to answer it?
In terms of actually exerting pressure, I'm not sure whether now would be responded well to by the general public. In a way, if you're going to start campaigning for something, you need to feel as though there's that oomph and dynamic out there for you to do. At the moment, the general public is basically feeling uncertain and concerned and would rather, you know, we're all complaining about the lack of clarity from a stay alert message as opposed to a stay at home message. I think if we were to exert pressure now on the FCO to rescind the blanket travel ban, it could easily be misconstrued. It could easily get complicated for people. Look, I mean, I think everyone in travel will be, I mean, exerting pressure. All the trade bodies, the whole industry will be very, very keen for the FCO's blanket response to be more nuanced as soon as is reasonable and as soon as it's commensurate with public health. But just at the moment, I'm not sure whether, you know, let's say the Telegraph having a go at the FCO is a battle worth fighting. I think if we see real, you know, change and this, you know, if whole continents suddenly find themselves COVID free, then, you know, of course we want to make sure that people can travel as soon as they can. But given that the mood music at the moment is that we're going to be quarantining for 2 weeks on the way back, you know, I think the thing I've been very, very keen on at the moment is the fact that the quarantine news is obviously very difficult in terms of holidaymakers coming back from a holiday and then having to isolate for 2 weeks. And that's a really tricky thing from a holiday perspective. But at the moment, it's simply a moot point when we're not able to travel. You know, so at the moment, the quarantining additional aspect from a tourism point of view, I'm not going to use the word irrelevant, but it's not as pungent an issue as it might otherwise have been. My assumption would be that the quarantining and the FCO advice should change in lockstep. They should move at the same time, and I suspect they will. Yeah.
Possibly one for you, Lyn. I may be reading more into this question that there is here than was intended. Jude Henderson at Canvas Holidays says, any thoughts about when you'll talk about 2021 holidays? For you as a monthly magazine publisher, will there come a point where you think, okay, maybe 2020 is not going to happen in terms of my readership. I am now open to the idea of promoting 2021 as a cover story, the big ideas for 2021?
Yeah, absolutely. And in a way, we're almost starting to sort of shift that way, particularly as we are in the print magazine, we cover a lot of long haul destinations as well. So, you know, we're already, I'm very much, as I play about with the feature list, I'm already moving things into 21, or we're already trying to, you know, we're imagining that that's what we'll be promoting. And of course, not just 21. I mean, some people are saying, you know, and I've noticed it from PRs as well, that some things have been coming through for amazing trips in 2022.
Yeah.
And I think certainly for the big, you know, the big trips that people really do dream about, well, yeah, you know, why not have a dream to go and do something amazing in you know, 21 and 22? And I think this is it. People, one of the things that we have noticed as well, and oh, by the way, I see there's a question about reader surveys, and we have done a reader survey, and we're going to be doing another one in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
But one of the things we have noticed already with our audience is that this has been such a shock, such a jolt to their lives, that actually we've had a lot of comments back, both completely unsolicited, but also when we did a survey about 3 weeks ago, we got a lot of comments from people saying that it made them rethink about travel, really, and they're not going to take it for granted ever again. I think this has been a bit of a wake-up call for them. And so the impression we're also getting is that it's made them even more aware of, I hate to use the phrase bucket list, but it's made them even more aware of some of the fantastic trips that they do want to do, and that they perhaps shouldn't wait. Yeah. Once they are in a position to do them, they should make sure they do them. And so we're getting this feeling that they are, even if it is for 2021 or 2022, they are planning some incredible trips and researching those already.
Yeah.
And just to pick up on the survey, yeah, because somebody has asked about the survey. So we ran a reader survey about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And if anybody contacts me, or maybe Henry, I could send you a link to it. Yeah. We have got the survey results, or most of the results, in a form that people can look at. But I think obviously things have moved even again in the last, in 3 weeks' time. So in 2 to 3 weeks' time, we're going to be doing another survey, and it will be the same questions, but also going into a bit more detail, because it's inevitably, when you do something like this, it's thrown up more questions as well. And we want to break it a bit down even a bit further about the types of trips people are going to be, doing. And so, as an example, in the next one, it'll be, would they be prepared to go on a group tour or not? Yeah. Because that's obviously a question I'm getting asked a lot. And things like, we did ask about, I think somebody asked about inclination to cruise. That was one of the ones we asked. And we may even break that one down a bit more in the next survey as well. So we are very much, we always try and pull our readers on just about everything. But yes, we're very much on the case with that at the moment. Yeah,
that was Caroline Caulfield-Rose's question. She represents Port of Seattle. What are your attitudes going to be towards promoting cruising holidays? Sophie, here for you. To what extent are you going to be focused on what you perceive as the most safe type of holiday to send your readers on, from camping that Ben has talked up and self-catering to mixing with groups? What do you feel about that, Sophie?
It's an interesting point. Our audience would tend towards the sort of domestic has always been a big focus for us, and sort of active. So camping has always been quite big, cruises less so. So I don't think we'll have to kind of diverge in a huge way from kind of what we've been doing historically. And I guess we'll be guided by all the new kind of safety guidelines as well. But yeah, I guess in the short term, it will be kind of a focus on the sort of holiday rentals. I know sort of in the early days, there was a kind of a leap towards big family get-togethers. Perhaps that's not quite so realistic now, and it will be more kind of smaller rentals where you can go with your immediate family and a granny or one other member of your family. And yeah, campsites. I know Pitch Up, I think, had been reporting kind of huge spikes in search this last week as well. And yeah, for us, cruising is not, I guess our audience is kind of cruise curious, but it hasn't been a kind of big sector for us. So we probably won't change our focus a huge amount from that.
Okay.
Cruises, however, a huge sector for us. Huge. So, we'll be returning to it as soon as humanly possible. And this is where PR, I think, is really, really important, because it's been a very, very difficult time for the cruise industry. And certainly at the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak, it was suffering very difficult headlines on a sort of very regular basis. I think managed a very, very good steer through that. We've got lots of balanced stuff. We've delivered the news where it's appropriate. We're still talking about the idea of people booking. And both these things, I think, weave into one. The question about whether we're talking about 2021, the question about whether we're talking about cruise. We need PR to start explaining to us how cruise is going to be as safe as is humanly possible for our readers. That's a big deal. And I think that's going to be one of the narratives that comes out of things like Clear. They're going to need to really talk to us about that. But from our point of view, I'm already talking about 2021. Every roundup that we produce is talking about that. Every roundup that we talk about when we talk about the beginnings of cruise coming back is going to be talking about 2021. We're also aiming stuff at the end of this season. I think the really interesting thing is going to be ski. You know, when do we get to start talking about that? Is there realistically going to be a ski season? I think there will be. I think it's the sort of activity that by and large can be maintained at a decent social distance. So it will be really good to be getting back into that zone as well. Cruise is, you know, it's going to, you know, it's not something that's going away from our readers' point of view. They absolutely love cruises. They'll use any opportunity to get back on board a ship or a boat. But we really, I think it is going to need that sort of lovely narrative of, no, this is good, this is fine, this is how it's going to work, this is how you're going to feel secure and happy, in order for us to really jump back in.
Okay, that's very helpful. So cleanliness and hygiene. So I moderated a property press conference this morning, and one of the questions was, should properties that are for sale have a hygiene certification to say that they are spotlessly clean for people to go in and walk around? And there wasn't much take for that from the trade. But I've got a couple of PRs here. Ian Stein, who from Essential Italy, says, will having an extra day between arrivals and departures give extra confidence? And I've got someone else saying, for the are you interested in hearing news on new cleaning procedures in hotels once we all start opening again? That person is Iman Denny Brown. I don't know the company name. Are you going to be focused on cleanliness and hygiene within stories, or is that too kind of nitty gritty?
I don't think people want to go on holiday and think about the fact that their room is just being cleaned and deep cleaned and they're going to have to wear a mask. And that, I mean, we've got to get over these points in travel. If we're still traveling and we're terrified of the possibility of getting a disease, we're not going to travel. You know, so I mean, it's up to governments and tourist boards to make sure that they're comfortable that the things being offered are not hotbeds for disease. But I don't think it's really the job, more than tangentially. Yeah, I'm Sophie and Lyn may disagree with me, but for us to be dwelling on this, you know, if we're talking about holidays as something that practically speaking people want to do in their leisure time, then we have to be confident that the things we're talking about will be things that people want to do.
Yeah, very well expressed. Sophie, would you take issue with that? Would you include, you know, comment on cleanliness and hygiene in stories, or do you just want to get to the point of where people should travel?
Yeah, no, I agree with Ben. I think if you've made the decision to go on holiday and then you've already got over that hurdle, you've made that decision that you're either taking the risk or you're confident that where you're going is clean and fit for purpose. And I think it's a sort of a layer. I mean, particularly for as in the brand, it's all about the kind of concise offering. So we wouldn't go into all the great detail about the type of antibacterial spray that have been used in the bathroom. It's just kind of, if it's in the paper or online, I'm confident that it's fit for purpose.
Yeah. So there won't be a little breakout box called cleanliness in every story?
I don't think so.
Rubber glove graphic.
It's got, yeah, exactly, rubber glove rating.
Yeah.
1 to 5.
The Nando's chart of cleanliness.
5 rubber gloves, that's marvellous. Okay, well, let's turn to Devon. Hayley Reynolds at Raw Food and Drink, who I think should be a poet, starts off, Devon has it all, the coast, the moors, green spaces, and amazing food and drink. You should be in PR. What aspect of Devon most interests our panellists in terms of holiday choices? Lyn, would you wax lyrical?
All of that, all of that, that sold me straight away. No, I think there you go. I mean, that sounds very Wanderlust. Coast, moors, lots of green spaces. You know, you've got a story there already, and with amazing food and drink on top. And I think you've got an opportunity with Devon, haven't you? Because there's Cornwall. We keep hearing, even again today on the lunchtime news, Cornwall was saying, please don't come to us. Yeah. So, So Devon has definitely got an opportunity here. And, you know, the fact is people will be travelling in Britain this year. As soon as they can, they will be. And understandably, perhaps Cumbria and Cornwall and Wales are saying, whoa, don't come to us just yet. But I think this is an opportunity, once things are safe for other places, to really say, whoa, hang on a minute, we've got all this. And funny enough, I had been thinking we needed to feature Devon soon. And, you know, it doesn't get the attention or love that it should. So treat it as an opportunity.
Sophie?
I was just going to say, I think kind of leading on from that, with the kind of nervousness of Cumbria and Cornwall and Scotland, everyone being quite nervous about everyone coming back, it's a real opportunity for the Midlands or, I don't know, Essex to sort of shout, be really sort of vocal and tell us about what's great about your part of the country as well. If we kind of want to disperse people and let everyone out gently, then this is your time to tell us what's great and why we should be sending our readers to your part of the UK as well.
Very good. I've got Ashley Daly from Grayling PR. What types of holidays will people be looking for as soon as restrictions lift? Will it beach versus city versus off the beaten track, etc.? I mean, if restrictions were lifted now, at least to the point you could take a British holiday, do you get a sense, each of you, for your readerships, what kinds of holiday you're looking at? And maybe Sophie, you start.
I think it depends where people have been locked down. I mean, I'm in London and I can't wait to, I mean, if I'm allowed to go to Cornwall, I'd love to be in Cornwall. I want to be on the beach. I want to be out in countryside.
Or Devon.
Devon. We love Devon.
Lovely. Devon's great. Super.
But maybe if you're in Devon, you want to be in London. It's kind of hard to say. But yes, I think overwhelmingly the search that we're getting is for kind of big open spaces and places you can feel free again. So I think that's what our readers want primarily.
And Ben?
Yeah, I mean, everything Sophie says. It's all the obvious active stuff, you know, camping, walking, hiking, cycling, where people can have active holidays. I'm sure they'll be pursuing them as much as they can. And if they can't, they'll just want beautiful scenery. They want to be away from the environment that they've been in for ages and ages. They'll probably want to go to Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole with Michelle Roberts as well. So I think all those things are you know, we have no more insight than anyone else does. What do you feel like you want to do? That's probably what we want to be doing. Our readers will be following their dreams as much as they possibly can within the UK.
Yeah. And maybe would pitching stories to you for domestic holidays with just a little bit of an activity element to them, a suggestion of kind of exercise, will that help with that pent up feeling of demand for getting out there and getting away from quarantine?
From my point of view, I mean, the trick here is really what sort of story we're talking about. You know, if you're hoping to be involved in a roundup that we're going to be doing about cycling holidays in Britain, and we get a sense that cycling holidays are about to happen, super. If you're hoping to get one of the Telegraph's writers to go and do a particular trip and deliver on that as a result of a colour read or a press trip or something like that, look, well, I think as Sophie said earlier, we're trying to work out how we're going to do that sort of thing. I mean, my hope is that from July we'll be able to send people to go and experience the new things that presumably over the past 3 or 4 or 5 months has been nearly opening when they got stuck by the last 6 weeks and will now be desperate to talk about new things. But I refer back to exactly what I said at the beginning. I want a news peg. It's not just that there's a lovely cycle ride out there. I want to know why this one, why now, other than the fact that we can suddenly do it again, which I sort of take on board.
Lyn, any thoughts on that?
All rather similar, really. And I mean, I guess Wanderlust has become known, I think, for long-haul travel, but realistically, a lot of our audience are going to be travelling domestically initially, but they're going to be interested in the same sort of things as if they were travelling overseas. And in the recent survey we did, we had a free text field about what did they want us to cover in the coming issues. And so that was completely all unsolicited. And walking came out top, open spaces, nature. And so if somebody was trying to get us interested in a UK destination, then yes, rather than just telling me, you know, about the place a bit, I'd want to know about those sort of factors. I'd want to know what it's like, what sort of activities there are there, probably soft activities, but activities, or I'd want to know about nature, wildlife watching, you know, can you do a safari in Essex, something like that. And you know, there's some incredible wildlife experiences, for instance, at the moment in the UK. You know, the Isle of Wight with the reintroduction of sea eagles. That's a story I'm interested in. So those are the sort of story, otters in Devon. Those are the sort of stories I'd be very interested in. Or, yeah, some sort of cycle or whatever. We've got a piece coming up on trekking with fell ponies in Cumbria. And that just gave us a really nice hook. Obviously, the author did it before COVID. But we'll be running that in a few weeks' time, and that sort of story is always going to appeal to us and our audience. Yeah.
Very good. I went out with my family the other night to listen to nightingales. I'm not going to give away the location, but that was a wonderful experience. So yeah. Anything is possible at the moment. So yeah. Sheila Manzano at Three Little Birds says, do we see rail travel, rail holidays re-emerging quickly as a safe way to travel? Any thoughts on that?
Hi, Sheila. I think, I mean, you sort of imagine people feeling slightly more kindly towards, if they're panic-stricken travellers, slightly more kindly towards rail than air travel, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I could see that being a nice thing. And the assumption and hope is that rail travel will be something that we're doing all terribly soon. So, yes.
Yeah, I think there'd already, pre-COVID, been a move towards rail travel. And we were covering, it's always been big with our audience, but we were covering it more, and we had quite a lot of it planned for this year. And so I think with the whole sustainability thing as well, I think rail travel will bounce back. You know, it's sexy and we feel good about it, and of course there's something romantic about it. And so as long as the rail companies and the companies selling rail do get over in a nice way about the romance of travel on rail, and that it's a different experience being packed on a commuter train going into London, then no, I think rail could really come back, and people probably will feel happier, in fact, at being on a train than being in a plane.
Okay, very good. I mean, the elephant in the room here, this is a question from Carolyn Spinks of the Association of British Tour Operators to Italy. It says, I think she's saying media coverage at the moment is very one-sided at the moment in that it's focusing on the consumer's rights to refunds. But she is saying maybe there won't be an industry there if the media isn't actually standing up for the preservation of the suppliers in the travel industry, the tour operators, the cruise lines, the airlines, and so forth. Tough one. I'm glad someone's asked it. Well done, Carolyn. It's a good question. Sophie, you know, what's your feeling on that as a news journalist?
I'd like to think that I've been offering both sides of the story. We've done a fair amount on consumer refunds. I've also done a couple of pieces on trying to back the industry so that there's something left for us all to go back to, and that, you know, selfishly, that includes my job.
Yes.
So yes, of course, we want to encourage our readers to kind of to think holistically about, you know, if you can postpone your trip, then to consider that, but obviously to try and put pressure on the industry, because there have been quite a few big names that haven't been playing according to the rules and have treated customers pretty badly, to try and hold them to account as well. And I think the sort of whole, you know, I sort of hate to say the sort of shambles going on with ABTA at the moment is not reflecting well on the industry. So yes, I try and offer both sides of the story as much as we can do. That has always kind of been the view of the Eye anyway, to try and be impartial, and I will continue to do so.
Very good.
We came in very, very early with a piece from our consumer editor, which I got him to write, Nick Trend, about the fact that he was changing it for once in travel's lifetime. He was changing his advice, which was to try and achieve your refund as soon as possible if people are being twitchy with you, to say give people a chance, make sure that tour operators have the ability to function, otherwise there's not going to be a travel industry to return to. I think we've been really, really scrupulous in our balance in terms of how we've been talking about things, and that's not to say that there have not been, as Sophie says, plenty of reasons to be upset about the way consumers sometimes have been treated during the course of the first month or so of this outbreak. I mean, it's exactly right. Of course, we understand that big companies have got real problems themselves in terms of how they're dealing with the way refunds are managed, and we like anyone else would be bang up for people being thoughtful and sensible about whether they can postpone things. But sometimes these are holidays for people who don't have much money, who are on a furlough scheme, who need the cash now to get it back. So it's important, I think, that newspapers and, particularly, like the Eye and like the Telegraph, where we've got real news outlets that we need to be pursuing, can deliver that. I think one of the interesting things I've been discovering is that I actually haven't been running as much travel news in the travel sections of late. I mean, I am doing it, but we're not running as much as we would normally do, simply because the movement in terms of the travel environment has been so swift that it's been better to cover that sort of stuff in the main newspaper and online. So we've become a little bit more inspirational in the print product than we perhaps would normally have a better balance in there, just because we're doing so much online, we're doing so much in the main consumer news that there's no real need to add to that mix, I don't think.
Yeah. Lyn, the industry versus the consumer.
I must admit, we don't do so much on consumer rights. We tend to leave that to the newspapers. We always feel that they can cover that better than us and in a more timely way. And they have got their consumer experts, which we don't. But at the same time, yeah, we're very aware of both sides. So we've run a couple of pieces online about how to support the travel industry, where we've tried to at least imply, obviously, how difficult it is for the industry as well at the moment, and kind of suggest that, if people can look at moving their holiday rather than asking for their money back, that would probably really help the industry. So we've tended to take that approach. And again, yeah, try to be fairly impartial and see it from both sides, but try and explain as well that obviously the industry is suffering too, and just try and give that picture. So yeah, it's been really interesting, hasn't it, seeing it all. And I think some companies will have come out with greater loyalty from their clients just because they've handled it very well, and they've put a lot more time and attention perhaps into talking to their customers and communicating with them, and where necessary trying to persuade them obviously to wait for a refund or to switch their holiday, whereas others have handled it very badly. So as ever in life, a lot of it has come down to communication anyway.
Very good.
But, yeah, good question.
We've just had Penny from the Adventure Creators in the Pyrenees saying, great webinar. Lyn, what is the best way to contact you? Should we give her your contact details after the webinar? Is that the best thing?
Yes, you can. But I would also suggest, because of the times we're in, obviously I'm working with a smaller core team. We're all mucking in, structure of the team's a bit different. So we've also got a generic email address, info@wanderlust.co.uk.
Okay,
and so
great.
I would also send things to that. So you could send it to me and to info@, because all of the team at the moment have access to that as well. And we're very much, as I say, all mucking in and picking things up as well.
And one other small one, Kate Hutchinson at Luca PR said earlier, quiz content, does it need to be unbranded, or are you open to a name check within a quiz question?
I guess it would depend what the brand was. But yeah, we might well be open to something and giving the brand a mention. Certainly with a couple of the quizzes we've been doing, destinations, have helped us, countries. So obviously that's been quite straightforward. Yeah. If it isn't a destination, yeah, we'd certainly consider it. If we felt that there was someone we were very comfortable with, that might be absolutely fine.
Very good. And Liz Blakeborough wants to know, it's the crystal ball question, when do you reckon PLs should be pitching press trips back to journalists? Is there a way to answer that question?
I'm happy to be pitched press trips now. I know Sophie's a bit leery about going there, but I mean, if we've got something that we think is going to be really, really good and it's likely to be running at a point when we all think it's likely to be viable to do, then I'm happy to talk about that sort of thing now. I mean, but you know, I'm no crystal ball user. Autumn, late autumn, I don't know.
I think there's no harm in pitching the trips now, because I think if anything is of potential interest, even if we don't commit to it now, I'd certainly would keep it on file, and because I'll obviously know, you know, whether it's, you know, strong interest or not.
Yeah, that's
so I would keep that on file, and, you know, until I feel confident that I can send somebody.
I think the other thing to bear in mind is that we've had a lot of press trips cancelled, obviously, over the last 6 months, 6 weeks, 2 months. And I'm speaking to our writers on the basis that, look, those commissions are probably still extant, assuming we come out of this at some point relatively near in the future. But I do want everything confirmed again. So anything that's not happened, I do want the PR to come back to me. I want the writer to come back to me and say, right, this is now back on the menu. It's really important that people don't just assume that we're going to be feeling exactly the same in August as we thought in April, in March, when we'd never even heard of COVID.
Yeah.
That's great. Can I just ask each of you, just finally, to summarize in a sentence what you're most open to at the moment, as things currently are, and obviously we will hope that things will soon change. Sophie, as a journalist, what are you most open to at the moment?
I think primarily it's just stay in touch, like Lyn said. Don't be afraid to send an email or even pick up the phone, if you don't mind listening to my children screaming in the background. You know, the good news stories, I think, at the moment, in terms of, I mean, literally good news, uplifting news stories. Some things that have worked well in recent weeks are a tour operator that's been talking about the kind of refund message, but it actually kind of telling our audience where that money is going. And actually, in this instance, it was making sure that people were staying employed in African nature reserves. And yeah, I don't mind talking about kind of press trips in the long term, but I think kind of very kind of short term ideas at the moment for me.
Yeah, we haven't even covered that. Good causes and human interest stories coming out of this are they're open to you. That's great. Ben, your thoughts at how PRs can help you at this moment?
I would say, away from all the stuff that we've talked about all the way through, the thing I might suggest is just take a punt. You know, because if you've got a good feeling that it might work during this particular environment, or it might work as something we put forward, I've been sort of trying stuff a lot more than perhaps I would in the normal run of things when I've got a regular flow of content coming in and it's all very easy and I understand how the world works, and that's great. Just like you, I have no idea what is going on at the moment. It's a bit frightening and a bit weird, but as a result, I am sort of having a bit more of a go than I perhaps might in the future. So if you've got something you think might be right, it might well be right. Let's have a go at it and see if follow it up, call, all those things are good.
Good. A little bit curveball, a little bit left field. That's good.
Yeah.
And Lyn, for you at the moment, what are you open to?
I'd say to people, think about our website and not just our magazine, because I find some PRs still are only thinking about the magazine, and they're only thinking about certain sections of the magazine or about the big features. And they're forgetting that we've got a website where we're putting up 2 or 3 pieces of content a day. Yeah. So I'm looking for short-term ideas at the moment. I'm very open to new ideas. We're covering lots of content we wouldn't have been covering 6 months ago, as long as it's right for our audience. And positive stories, good news stories. And we love anything perhaps to do with nature, anything that surprises people. You know, I love it when readers say, I never knew that, you know, I'd never heard of that place, or I didn't know that you could see that there, or whatever. So, yeah, I guess little known secrets are always appealing, but yeah.
Very good indeed. Well, thank you very much indeed to our panelists, Sophie Lam, Ben Ross and Lyn Hughes. We've had everything from, I think, timeless training ideas through to some very interesting insights into what travel editors will be looking for once we get those first green shoots of a recovery in the travel industry. So it's been a fascinating debate. I'm so very grateful to our panelists. And to you, our audience, we'll see you the very next time. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.